The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through him, and without him nothing came to be. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. A man named John was sent from God. He came for testimony, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came to be through him, but the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, but his own people did not accept him. But to those who did accept him, he gave power to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not by natural generation, nor by human choice, nor by a man's decision, but of God. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we saw his glory. The glory is of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, 'The one who is coming after me ranks ahead of me, because he existed before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace. Because while the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. The only Son, God, who is at the Father's side, has revealed him." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I'm always a little bit challenged to preach this particular gospel. We hear the prologue to John's gospel today, and we don't hear much, if anything, of the Nativity scene. I think, well, should we be using this one on Christmas? And I'd say yes. That's the long and short of it. Yes, this is a great gospel passage for us, but it is a challenge to preach, and it issues a challenge to us. But I think there's maybe it's as incense fills the air, and we've tried to keep it somewhat saturated between yesterday and today. There's this sense of mystery, and I think that we get that at Christmas when we start to think about what it is that God has done for us, how great his love is for us, that his love knows no limits, and all the rest, right? But as we enter into that, prayerfully meditating on the scriptures, allowing ourselves to go, can I say, in contemplation, just like our relationship with God, it's caught up in mystery. It's fantastic. But I think what this passage does for us, and I think what the Nativity does for us, is it pierces the mystery, right? So here we have a bright light, a bright ray of light piercing the mystery, making the mystery, in fact, known for us, so that we could not only receive the good news of a newborn king, the birth of a newborn king, but also that we might know how to make this story our own, how to live in it, how to live out of it, how to draw strength from it, and the rest. So this is piercing the mystery stuff, right? God has become man. What do we do? We think, when we think of any way that we have acted so as to love someone, have we not had to learn their language? Right? Have we not? Some talk about with some frequency the love languages, right? Dr. Chapman's love languages. To learn the other, learn the way that they receive love, That's how we want to speak, right? We could do thousands of acts of love for someone and not hit the mark because it wouldn't be done according to the way that they receive it. Well, think about the love that God has for us, that he has translated himself into human terms in order to communicate himself to us. Right? He came in the mode of the recipient, right? In the mode of the person who would receive, so as to communicate the fullness of his divinity to us. What great love it is. And he's in this sense translated himself into our terms. And yet, of course, he goes beyond us in any number of ways. And I will say there's a hope-filled going beyond us that allows us to celebrate, I think, with new life and vigor at this particular celebration. You know, without the passage from John, right, the light in darkness, we might be inclined to make Christmas about nostalgic reminiscences. Right? We're going to think about, you know, a bygone era where, you know, God walked among men or something. That sounds like a pagan myth, and it probably, you know, that it is. We've made it a different kind of story, right? But it's like, oh, when there were giants, you know, and how things were better, and everybody had morals, and everybody, you know, knew what was what, and we all got along. And did that ever happen? You know, it's like these. Sometimes they're pious because we throw God into the mix, and sometimes they're simply not because we don't. But they're just a reflection on a bygone era that never happened. And without the Gospel of John, I think we drift into that. But with the Gospel of John, we have a light in the darkness. Do you know what that means? Right? But we have to walk through it a little bit. We know what that means. God didn't say, okay, like 2,000 years ago, you know, things are pretty good down there, but I'd like to spice it up a little bit, so I'm going to get in there, right? He didn't say this, you know, the world needs a little added flavor, so I'm going to get in there. That's not what happened. He said the world has fallen into rebellion. The world has fallen into sin. The world has fallen into, I don't know, the reality of compounded self-inflicted injuries. The world is a dark place. It's filled with death and controlled by the power of death. I'm going to get in right there. And he doesn't just get in like, you know, I'm going to go and stand above it and start pointing fingers and preaching from afar. He goes in as a baby. He goes all in. He goes to the lowest place. And it's not just that he's born as a baby. He's born in the squalor of the manger. And I've asked some artists to consider, give us a new manger scene, one that's much dirtier than this one, you know, because this is not. It's real in as much as it points to the goodness of God, right? That beautiful scene points to the goodness of God, and in as far as it does, it's real. But it's not real in as much as it doesn't exactly reflect the historical reality that God entered the world at a very dark time. And he lit a candle there. What would it have meant if he entered a room filled with sunlight and lit a candle? Right? Superfluous in the worst way. But instead he lights a candle in a dark room, and he gives that room light. And that light then exposes the darkness of the world, right? It shines up all the cracks and creatures and the rest. And it also is a sign then of hope. It's a light that gives life. And that light is nothing other than the love of God we see here. Now I say, last night I gave part of a reflection to say something like, you know, the nativity scene is a disgrace. And what I mean by it is that the nativity scene reflects the fact that in the world of the Caesars, in the world like going about its business, there's no room for God. So he's born on the margins of all margins. He's born. Because there's no room for him. Right? It's when we look at the way that we tell this particular story, we should expect that Jesus has something better to lie in than a feeding trough. Right? This is not for all of you mothers out there. How horrible would it be if what you had to place your baby in was a feeding trough? You wouldn't do it. You try not to, right? But this is the reality of Jesus being born in the manger at Bethlehem. It's born on the margin of margin. And again, but this is the way, this is the way our story plays out. The powers of the world have no place for God. They have no place for Jesus. But God is making a way. God is making a way. And in the midst of this, right, under the nose of the Caesars, under the nose of the powers of the world, the true king of the world is born. And his kingdom is launched there. Not the way that we would expect it to be launched. Again, because we live in the other story. We expect a kingdom to be launched with power and wars and weapons and oppression and coercion and the rest, because we consider power to be the way that the world considers it to be. But the kingdom of God is launched by a baby. By God becoming a human being, can't lift up his head, can't fend for himself, can't feed himself, can't clean himself. God becomes a baby so as to take on and raise up what was cast down, to restore the human project, and so restore all of creation. Right? This is God's great plan, and that's how it takes effect. It doesn't take effect by military ruler running in, blasting his enemies off the face of the earth. And all. That's how it takes effect. And if that's how it takes effect 2,000 years ago, then that's also how it takes shape today. That's how it takes effect today, in surprising ways, in extraordinary ways, but in ways that we come to find out are fitting because they're the ways of God. Right? Where is God at work? We hear in the Christmas story, the angel comes with the message to look for Jesus. Right? He comes to the message of the angel to the shepherds is to look for Jesus. What is it? And what is the sign? There are two things. One is that he's just up the road. You're going to find God. You're going to find the Messiah, the King. He's just up the road, right? And he's laid in a manger. And of course, the sign he's laid in a manger, because no one else is, right? I mean, he's the one. This is what we're pointing to. But it's the Messiah. He's laid in a manger, and it's just up the road. Well, where is God at work today? What unexpected places is God at work today? And maybe he's not even just up the road. Maybe God is at work in my heart, in my family. And I have to have eyes that are open to seeing him. And I have to have a heart that wants to go his way. And I have to give my whole life over to his kingdom in the way that he wants it to be built up. Because, in the page after page of the scriptures, whether you see in the Gospel of John here at the beginning, or read any part of the Christmas story, read any of these readings that we've had today, we look at God moved by compassion for what is rightly his, but is rebelled against him. God is filled with compassion for what is his, that he will go to all kinds of lengths beyond our imagination in order to raise up what was cast down. And he's raising us up today, my friends, in our challenge. I say, this year, my experience, and I think the experience of a good number of us, this year, Christmas, is tougher than last. It's tougher than last year. And I don't know if that's because of all kind of loss. I don't know if it's because of, is it simply a media concoction, always the kind of stirring up of the, it's so dark, we're in desperate times, Because, of course, the more fear is stoked, the more we're buying certain things whatever. There's a power of money, do you know? Is it that? But there's something real there, too. There's something real. And we struggle in our day. But we don't struggle alone, because God is with us. And just as he entered the darkness of human history some 2,000 years ago, he enters our dark day as well. And if Jesus is here with us, and if he's inspiring in us the desire to work for his kingdom, to not be oppressed or crushed by the darkness of the world, but to have our lives bring the light of his love wherever we go, then, my friends, we have great hope. We have great hope. He is leading the way. God is leading the way. And not just leading the way, God is making a way. You know, as we go down life's twists and turns, we often find ourselves in like seemingly dead ends and dark corners. You can wonder how we got there all we want. This is all well and good. But when we turn to God, we find that he is making a way, even in the darkness of our darkest day. And if he's making a way for us, and we can trust and follow him there, then the light of his love is being born. And the beautiful thing, I think, my friends, although we're somewhat reduced crew this Christmas, we're struck down by the virus, among other things. We are those called to God. We are those gathered by God to be about his purposes. And then simply we're not simply basking in the light of God's love. Our hearts and our lives are made to radiate the light of his love for a world that is otherwise left in darkness. My friends, God loves his world. And he's called us to give ourselves to him and his plan so as to bring new life and love and light to his world. And today he gives us the strength. He gives us similar signs. Right? Then he was born in Bethlehem and laid in the feeding trough. Today, my friends, we eat and drink his flesh and blood here at this altar. His sign that he's laid in that place where the animals feed. But here he makes himself food for us, so that our efforts in building up his kingdom, of advancing his rule of truth and justice, of mercy and love, compelled by compassion, that his kingdom will go on, and we will be part of the advancement of his rule to every corner of his creation.